Well, hello there, how is everyone? I hope you are all well on this fabulous, fabulous Friday. And do you know what else is fabulous? That's right, you're fabulous. And I hope you also have a fabulous weekend. But we do have some meat and potatoes to get into as we talk about the Idaho 4 case. And this is video 2 of 2 today. And I think this is potentially the first time that I've done this. And that is that I'm going to talk to you about what I truly believe happened in the Idaho 4 case. Before I do that, however, I must say this. I am not a professional. I'm not in law enforcement. And this is purely the layman talking about speculation based on observation. I've taken every single thing that is out there in the public arena and formulated my own version of what I believe is a potential for what happened. Because I'm not one of these people who can look at the evidence that's been placed before us so far and genuinely say that I'm convinced that Bryan Kohberger did the crime. What I will say is that I am completely open to the fact that he could have indeed done this crime. Because I'm not a professional, because I'm not in law enforcement, and because I'm not skilled in the art of being a law enforcement officer, someone who investigates these types of crimes and perhaps has accolades in the aforementioned, it perhaps doesn't enable me to see things that they perhaps do. So when I look at Bryan Kohberger, I see things that are missing. When they try and tell me that Bryan Kohberger was fixated on Madison Mogen and he entered into this house on this specific night and did this specific crime in the manner, again, which has been placed before us in this time frame, I struggle with it. I struggle with it perhaps purely because of my inexperience. So I am fully aware that what I'm about to say could indeed just be complete and utter bollocks. But again, I talk to you because this is all the stuff that's out there in the public eye. From the stuff that came out right at the beginning and then was swiftly removed. From all of the posts where you have two camps, and that is the camps that will listen, the camps that won't. And trying to find the wheat from the chaff. Because there is an abundance of chaff. So, what do I think happened? What do I think was the real story behind what happened at 1122 King Road on the 13th of November 2022? Look, we're literally 2-3 days away from it being a year. And Bryan Kohberger is the one who's facing the chopping block. But in my opinion, and a non-professional opinion, it has yet to be shown publicly that he is indeed the person who did the crime. Now, again, like I've said, there is potential that perhaps there will be more stuff that comes out later on. But again, I've questioned multiple times if that's the case, then why has it taken 10 requests for discovery now? And why is there seemingly so much silence and secrecy surrounding this case? Because I don't buy that it's just to protect the likes of Bryan Kohberger and his constitutional rights and trying to maintain his ability to have a fair trial, because I think that went out the window long ago. What we have to hope for here is a scenario where we have a jury who is truly willing to look at the evidence and be subjective, not just be clouded in this horrendous crime and act with their hearts more than their head. But anyway, let's get into it. Now, I've not been a believer that this person entered the house to attack Madison Mogen. Because how I play that in my head don't work. And in video 1, I talk about it more in depth, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But what I feel makes sense here is that the person who entered this house had been here before. They knew where to go. They knew that doors perhaps would be unlocked. They knew that the sliding door to get into the property would be unlocked, or they knew a different way. Perhaps the sliding door wasn't even how this person got in, because they knew perhaps even the front door would be unlocked, and they just walked in the front door. But I feel that the person who did this crime knew this house. And potentially they knew who was in this house on that specific night. So who would have known who was in the house on that specific night? In my opinion, it would have been people who were involved in that specific night and the time leading up to when we believe the crimes took place. I can't buy, regardless of anyone else's feelings, that someone drove from Washington to Moscow in their own car, drove around in a manner that would look suspicious when you factor in their movements that act like a lost car. Many people, if they just saw that footage, would think, hold on, that looks like a DoorDash car. Someone who's been sent to 1122 King Road, and they come across Queen Road, and they're confused by that. So they're looking, and then they come across this house, this 1122, and the pieces all seem to fall into place. I personally are yet to see a piece of footage that coincides with a white Hyundai Elantra and a secondary car, because let's not forget that if we're believing Brian Kohberger is the person who did this crime, then based on the fact that the DoorDash delivery driver arrived at this house pretty much the same time, would have meant that they were basically driving behind one another, or one and two, at least in tandem to a degree. But look, what do we know? We know that these poor victims were doing things that night. They were out. Not all together, but they were out doing things. But Xana and Ethan were at a party. They were at a party, and at this party, according to what's out in the public, is that during their time at this party, there was an argument. There was a fight of sorts that Xana would have to step in, break up, so on and so forth. We don't know a massive amount. There's been some speculation as to what the context of that was. But it has been said, and again, we can't prove this, but it has been said that there's a potential that someone was taking steroids. Steroids make people angry. Angry as fuck. And I know this because I have hung about with people who own gyms. I know people who own gyms. I have friends who own gyms. I have friends who have competed at a world level in bodybuilding and have partaken in the taking of such things. And I've seen the anger that boils inside them. I have had a friend who very, very nearly killed his own brother due to the effects of these. And it was that very thing that made him realise that they just weren't something that he could continue doing. Now, what I don't want to do here is point the finger specifically at an individual and say this individual did this thing, because that would be wrong. And everybody I talk about in this is innocent until proven guilty, even if I just allude to them as a person. But again, I'm basing what I say based on the evidence that's out there. Because let's make no bones about it, we don't really know what's true and what isn't true, what we can listen to, what we should listen to, and what is just white noise or chaff. So we know that there is or we're led to believe there's this fight, there's this argument, and it disperses, and Xana and Ethan go home. So in my non-professional opinion, it makes more sense that this attack spurned from this. That this was a continuation of a potential fight or an argument that had started previously. The attack itself and the manner of this attack showed rage, showed anger. And what we've learned from the actual what happened itself just points more towards that Ethan and Xana were actually the first people who were attacked. Even early on, Steve Gonsalves stated that they didn't have to go upstairs. So again, that single piece of information from someone who is at ground zero kind of alludes to the fact that he had inside information that Xana and Ethan were attacked first. Now, again, I could be wrong, but I'm basing this, like I said at the beginning, I'm basing it on what information we have. And that single piece of information would seem to suggest that. Because I think, how would it have worked if Xana and Ethan were second? If they'd have gone upstairs first and then come down? Why? The question is still, why is that? Because we know that the altercation happened in the room, not in the hallway, not outside Dylan Mortenson's door, because Shirley should have heard something, should have seen something. There would have been evidence of that attack in that space between rooms. So we know whoever did this physically went to the rooms. And what else do we learn? We know that there was noises and Dylan Mortenson had apparently come out and shouted, "Shut the fuck up." So we know that whoever did this crime heard that. You would imagine they heard that. So just say this person is downstairs and that is actually heard from the same floor. And then when this has been done, they then go on the hunt to find who said it. And that is what leads them to go upstairs, because they're on the hunt for who told them, who shouted, because they don't want to leave a witness. And perhaps it just so happens that Dylan Mortenson locks her door, so they venture to another one. They don't want to make they don't want to break the door down. They don't want to have to kick a door in, so they venture upstairs and they stumble across another room. And lo and behold, you have attack number 2. And you have perhaps a scenario where Kaylee Gonsalves is trying to protect her friend. She becomes the shield between the attacker and the victim. Hence how brutally she is attacked. And then that person or people leave, because it's now about getting out of Dodge. And what supports this? We know that there are K-bars floating around this vicinity. We know that. The likes of Drip Drop have shown pictures showing frat members holding these. They are not doctored pictures. They are pictures of frat members with the very, very weapon that was used, or we're being led to believe was used in this crime. Makes you wonder. Again, I go back to the ROTC, because there was some things that were said online that potentially they learned to use these kind of things. These knives are things that float around this campus as part of that. That would actually explain why there could have potentially been a knife sheath with Brian Koberger's fingerprints on it, if indeed they are used in this, in the educational arena of sorts. Maybe it's just to get them to feel the thing that was used. Again, I'm spitballing there, but I'm trying to sort of ascertain how Brian Koberger could have been brought into this as an innocent bystander, so to speak. Perhaps these knives just float around these two campuses. Maybe they go from one to the other. Who knows? Perhaps they're black market goods and the frats actually sell them to people. Who knows? But then you would think that there'd be lots of DNA, not just one. Who knows? But again, I've spoken about this previously regarding Brian Koberger. If it was him, would he not have handled that wearing gloves to make sure that his DNA wasn't on it. Just makes you wonder why his DNA was on it, on the button snap, which would seem to go that he undone it and perhaps checked it, looked at it in an educational setting, perhaps put it back, clipped it together, and that was it. I don't know. But we know that these do float around these campuses. And I'm guessing that one of them's missing. Have law enforcement took the time to see whether there is some way of finding out if there is indeed one missing from these campuses, if indeed I'm right in the feeling that they do have them. They've got pictures of people who have them. So what am I getting at? I'm getting at a situation where you've got an argument, a fight. You've got a situation that would seem to say that the people who were potentially around this fight had the very weapon that was used, and the manner with which the crime was done would seem to suggest, and paired with what parents of victims have said, that the people who are involved in that fight were the people who have the very weapon that was used, or the same style, were attacked first. And potentially, because they didn't have to go upstairs, but they did, it was in fact Kaylee and Maddie who became collateral damage. And perhaps spurned by another house member who had shouted and alerted them to the point that there was someone else in the house. By which point they shut the door, shut it, locked it, and made sure they couldn't get in. Again, I am spitballing, but I feel that this is a credible version of events. And I want you to let me know down below what you think. When all said and done, and everything that you've seen and everything that you've heard, is this about a TA, someone studying for their doctorate, a criminology student who just happened to have a fixation on one of the housemates, Madison Mogan. And one night he decided to drive over in his own car while turning his phone off, seemingly got lost, or I don't know, maybe had a hiccup and was driving around in front of the cameras for some strange reason, I don't know. But then he entered the house, not knowing who was in there, and with evidence to show that there was a potential, there was quite a few people in there, but he entered anyway and done this crime. And then left the sheath behind. Imagine if the person who did this themselves had been at a party. They'd been at a party. They were angry. There'd been a fight. Emotions running high. Perhaps not thinking straight because of alcohol, perhaps. Mixing alcohol with other things. Wouldn't that be more likely the person who would make the fatal mistake of leaving a sheath behind? Now, again, they could have wiped that sheath down and wore gloves, thinking that they had covered their tracks, which would explain why there wasn't any other DNA on there, but they missed the button snap. And perhaps that button snap had just been touched by somebody else another time. And this just fateful situation just led us to where we are. Is that beyond a reasonable doubt? Let me know down below, and I'll catch you all in the next one.